Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and in bookstores across the country. We'll even help you promote your book. That's right, we do all this for you. Biography, self-help, mystery, novels, sci-fi, even a children's book. No matter what genre, Page Publishing can bring your book to life. Call today for your free author submission kit and find out how you can be the next published author at Page Publishing.
Call for your free author submission kit at 855-993-2114. That's 855-993-2114.
Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition. Welcome back to all our viewers and listeners. Boy, I tell you one thing, folks. It's every time we're on, crazy things are happening. So, what not to have a better guest from the great state of Texas, front and center, Richard Battle. Welcome back to Schaftlein Report. Always enjoy having you, my friend.
Mark, thank you for having us back. It's always a pleasure.
Richard, you're really at the epicenter. I mean, let's talk about a couple of headlines to start out with, and then we'll get into the key issues. But listen, I never thought I would see this in this election year, but Richard, it's actually happening. The fanboys, the pom-pom girls, they're starting to turn on Joe Biden. And these are not small pom-pom girls, and these are not little fans. These are the likes of the New York Times and the poll of polls of pollsters, 538 Nate Silver, and the general recommendation, Ezra Klein came out and just flat out said Biden needs to gracefully figure out a way to exit stage left, and then went on to praise him as the greatest president in the history of the country. Nate Silver, who has high regard for President Biden, he's simply a numbers guy, and he's looking at the numbers, and he's saying that these numbers are going the wrong way and they need to make a change. Basically, I'm paraphrasing what he said there, but that's been the case. Richard, did you ever think you would see the Democratic Party turning on Joe Biden? And is that what we're seeing now?
Well, I've kind of expected it. I've thought since he got elected, he would not be the candidate for re-election. And if you remember, Lyndon Johnson did not bail out of the 1968 campaign until March. And so I think that they're having to time this when they get their ducks lined up. And unfortunately, I think their operation right now is probably like the movie Wag the Dog. Every day they come into some situation that throws them off whatever strategy they have for getting a candidate to replace him. They have to watch what they do with Kamala Harris. They have to watch how they get Biden to step aside. Biden's not going to make the decision, I don't believe, regardless of what it is. It's people behind him, Obama and others, who will determine when and how and who will be the nominee.
But let me ask you this, and I've heard a lot of theories about that there are people around him calling the shots. And I believe that, by the way. But simultaneously, you talk to Democrats, you hear Democrats talking, and unless it's universal spin, which it very well could be, their position is always, well, every time I'm around him, he seems perfectly competent. Not a senile bone in his body. His acuity is good. He's sharp mentally. But you and I both know in front of a camera, and look, that's where 99.9% of people see the president. And the amount of people he sees, it's relatively tiny fraction. On camera, he looks like an absolute buffoon, like he's really has early stage dementia, frankly. And that's a hard thing to say about our president, but we're not trying to criticize him. We're all going to get it. Father Time eventually wins them all. But Richard, who could it be? I mean, Joe Biden is the guy. Only he can make that decision.
Well, I would disagree from the standpoint. I don't think Joe will make the decision, because when it's time and they have the plan ready, I think the parties will go to him and tell him, like they did Nixon, that it's time to step aside, and they won't give him an option. And I believe they probably got that lined up. They just don't have all the ducks ready for it right now. And we have to remember, in Texas, there's always been an expression about yellow dog Democrats, and they would rather vote for a yellow dog than they would a Republican, for example. And so they'll vote regardless who the Democrat candidate is, whether Joe Biden's left on the ballot until after the election or whether he's taken off. It doesn't really matter who the candidate is for most of those people.
So you're of the ilk that sitting here today, mid-February, you think Joe Biden will not be the nominee for the Democratic Party?
Yes, I totally believe he will not be the candidate. It could go all the way to the convention before he is exited, but I believe that by the convention he will be out of the scene, and they will have a replacement in, and it's just a matter of who that person is and what they do with the Harris problem.
Well, you could be right about that, because look, the fact of the matter is, prior to the convention, no one is going to be able to accumulate the number of delegates that you're going to need to win the Democratic Party nomination. So from that legal aspect of it, Joe Biden will be the nominee. Now, if they head into the Democratic convention, then Trump's the nominee of the Republican Party. And again, it's going to be a 3 to 5 way race. People may not like that, but Jill Stein's not going anywhere. She's getting 1 to 2%. Cornel West is not going anywhere. He's 1 to 2%. Robert Kennedy's 7 to 10%. So, we can see polling of a Biden-Trump match, but really it's 5 people. So Richard, they're going to head into that convention. It's probably in August, as I'm guessing, where their convention is, late July, early August, normally when they are. Yeah, so I mean, Biden could go in there as the clear winner of delegates, but I got news for you. If he's polling behind Trump 5 to 7 points at the convention, that's the only place I see where it could happen. Unless his mental facilities just decline rapidly, which is a possibility, but probably not likely. But so that's the theory of the case then. Likely at the Democratic convention, whatever plan B is would be implemented at the DNC.
Well, if it's a health reason, it could happen at any time before or after the convention. If it's a political reason, I think it would happen at the convention. And I used to think that rules mattered. And I was reading this biography about Franklin Roosevelt. And in 1944, he wanted to get rid of Barclay and put Harry S. Truman as vice president. And based on all the Democrat Party rules, he could not do that. And so what did he do? He said, screw the rules, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's what I believe is going to happen. They're going to do what they want to do to put their person at the top of the ticket, regardless of what rules others may have to follow.
Well, it's interesting, Richard. The Democratic Party today, they do not seem to have a plan to fix the campaign. I mean, Biden didn't do the Super Bowl. 86% of Americans view him as too old for the job. He had that disastrous press conference after the Hur report came out, where he literally made things worse. And, the media people had to come to his defense. But I'm sitting here saying, with Trump leading Biden by 2 to 7 points nationally and up on him in all the swing states. Bear in mind, I have some difficulty believing Trump's going to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, but he doesn't need to win them all. Just needs to win part of them. I just don't see their plan B. I mean, Richard, I'm looking at some polling numbers. Heck, Trump beats Kamala Harris worse than Biden. Throw Newsom's name in there, he's down about the same level Harris is. And you throw any of the other Democrats in there, yellow dog Democrat or not, the one who's actually polling the closest is Joe Biden. And that's probably because of name recognition, the fact he's the sitting president. But I got to tell you something. And I know that the Democrats say the same thing about the Republicans. Oh, what's plan B? You're going to have Trump. Okay, but I just don't see it on the other side. So whoever the they is that are controlling Joe Biden, the theys better make some decisions reasonably soon, because you know how stubborn Joe Biden is. I mean, he's a legendary stubborn guy. And Richard, he's sitting there saying, hey, I've never lost an election, which is true. He got elected to the Senate at the age of 29, never lost. But he did lose for the presidential race twice when he ran. So I don't know. Betting odds right now, Richard, Trump 43, Biden 27. Your thoughts?
Well, first thing I'd say is we have to remember in polling, they never polled dead voters or counterfeit voters. So that's always going to influence. Second, yes, Biden's not lost an election, but I could see Democrat operatives going to him and saying, hey, we know you're crooked. And if you don't do this now, we will partner with the Republicans and we'll make sure you, your kid, and everybody else are thrown in jail. And so they have that at minimum over him if he, as alleged, has done some of these illegal activities. And so that to me would be one of the ways they could nudge him out very easily.
Well, they could. Now think about this too, Richard. You and I are sort of reminds me of the old point counterpoint debate. We're on the same side, but come to different conclusions. Biden raised an astounding $42 million in the month of January. So the Democratic donors have opened their wallet to this guy. And again, is he too stubborn to leave the race? I don't know. But, you bring up a good point there. He is very well protected. But, Richard, when we go back to the things we talked about at the first of the show, again, this is like peeling off the onion. First it's Ezra Klein, then it's Nate Silver. Axelrod himself has expressed reservations, and he got on the wrong side of the Biden team. Mainstream media reporters, Richard, are finally asking the tough questions. We saw some evidence of that night of the disastrous press release. I don't know. I mean, how do you think the country would perceive it if he stepped aside? Give me I know we don't know, but your Richard battle, put your genie hat on. How's the country perceive it?
Well, in some ways, I think there'd be a relief from the standpoint there'd be a candidate on that side of the aisle that would appear cognizant and able to speak and have more energy and strength than what they have currently. And to me, when he raises $42 million in California and he's going out there today, I don't believe that money's going to Joe Biden. I believe that money's going to the Democrat presidential candidate. And when Johnson stepped aside in March of '68, I mean, we had the Vietnam War was going on. It looked bad for the Democrats anyway. Very similar to this situation at that time, but I don't think there was a big change negatively in the country when Johnson stepped aside. I think there was a positive, hey, they did something. They're going to put somebody in there to change the policy than what Johnson did. And unfortunately for the Democrats, Richard Nixon got elected and he did change the policy.
Yes. Well, let's shift away from presidential politics here for a minute. And let's talk about what happened in Russia. I have the firm belief that Alexei Navalny was poisoned. I mean, the guy was living in horrific conditions in a maximum security prison 60 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. But my God, the day before he died, they showed him in a prison cell he was sort of gaunt, looked really thin. I mean, look, they didn't feed him well. They kept him in isolation for roughly 70% of the time he was there. Richard, did the Russians poison him to kill him so he'd be out of Putin's hair as they come to the election?
Well, to me, the telltale test is whether they put sunlight on it and have independent autopsies and open it up and tell what happened. And any effort to hide what happened or not say something with an independent agency tells me it's a cover-up.
Still have not permitted the family to view the body. I mean,
Yeah.
and now that I heard media stories saying it could be 10 days to 2 weeks before they allow that to happen. What that means to me is whatever poison they use to kill him, the half-life of that poison is probably a week to 10 days before it goes out of your system.
Yeah.
They'll let the poison out of his system. They're not going to bring in an independent. They'll bring in some crony from the state who works for for Putin, and he'll say, "Oh no, this was a natural death. He was walking and his system broke down, heart attack, you name it." That's what I believe is going to happen. So I don't know. It's
Well,
a difficult situation.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that's what's going to happen, and I think the Russians did take him out. I was only saying that the only way they could prove they didn't take him out would be to immediately allow independent autopsy and verification.
Yeah, I concur with that point, Richard. Listen, we're going to take a 60-second break, and then we're going to be back. We're going to talk about Trump, New York, domestic politics. A lot going on, folks. Stay with us. See you in 60.
When I grow up, I want to work for a woke company, like super woke.
When I grow up,
I want to be hired based on what I look like,
rather than my skills.
I want to be judged
by my political beliefs. I want to get promoted
based on my chromosomes. When I grow up,
I want to be offended
by my coworkers
and walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see,
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety and do workplace sensitivity training all day long.
When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder
just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist.
I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
All right, we're back with Richard Battle. Richard, that New York case that came down with the massive judgment against Trump, I mean, this is really disgusting because no investor lost a dime in this deal. The governor of New York and the attorney general, Kathy Hochul and Letitia James, outright campaigned on promises to get Trump. And now they've been somewhat successful in their efforts, in their campaign to get him, but it's sending shockwaves through the rest of New York. I mean, honest to God, a successful investor like Kevin O'Leary said, why would anyone ever want to consider doing business in New York? Saw an interview he did last night with Laura Coates on CNN. So I ask you the question, Richard, when the state weaponizes the governor and the attorney general against an individual, and a judge who was a Democratic judge and didn't like Trump throws an outrageous figure out there of damages for, where no one got hurt on a guy who is arguably one of the most successful developers in New York City's history. Richard, what message does that send to the rest of the world that would consider doing business in New York?
Well, I think it's interesting. The governor, when the verdict came down, the governor congratulated the AG on such a great job. And then Kevin O'Leary comes out and says what he said about why do business in New York. And next thing you know, the governor's on talking about, well, hey, that wouldn't apply to anybody else. It was only Trump. He's the only one it would ever apply to. Well, how can you trust a politician in that situation if they've proved they would use that weapon if you got on their wrong side? And that's all it would take. And I think that we've seen governments at all levels go after people based on skin color, ethnicity, gender, all kinds of different things in the last few years, more and more and more, by breaking laws into segments. And that scares all of us, and it makes a unstable marketplace for us to operate and base ideas for our lives.
Yeah, I concur with you. I think what they did was an absolute travesty. Think about it. Democratic governor didn't like Trump. Letitia James campaigned against him. The judge looks like a cartoon character and slaps him with a fine. Hopefully, the appeals process will get that reduced. I mean, I could have seen a $1 fine being acceptable, but $355 million, that's it's over the pale. All right. Now, I want to shift subject a little bit. Richard, you guys in Texas are experiencing a massive illegal immigrants coming on board, and now it's starting to come through San Diego and California. Look, that shockingly has become the top issue among Democratic voters. Never thought I would see that. And Richard, am I being too conspiracy theory when I believe that this was an organized plan by Biden from the beginning to get illegal immigrants into sanctuary cities in blue states, primarily blue, but not exclusively, for the purpose of election, what I'm not calling election interference, just padding the voting rolls? They can't vote, but they have to be counted in the census. Am I being too cynical, or am I spot on that that's why Biden's letting 5.6 million people cross, and out of that 2.3 are in the country just since Biden became president?
Well, I agree with you on everything except the numbers I believe are higher. And
they are.
So when he was running for election in 2020, he said we could take 2 million illegal aliens a year, that we could handle that. And the blue cities and states didn't say a whole lot initially because it didn't cost them very much. Then they were squealing about a month or so ago. And one of the things I noticed was when they were negotiating the border bill in the Senate, all of a sudden the cities and states kind of quieted down a little bit. And I believe they did that because there was a bailout in that bill that was masked by the other subjects where people didn't know about it. And these cities and states were expecting to get totally reimbursed and not have any out of pocket for these illegal aliens. And instead of trying to deport people, their solution is they want to give them jobs, driver's license, and everything but voter ID and citizenship on the front end. And of course, what will happen, like we've seen with the DACA group, once you do that, you'll never be able to deport them because people will say, well, they've been here 5 years. They've been here 10 years. We need to make them citizens. And so to me, the solution that Trump is talking about with deportations, that's our only opportunity to try to reclaim some sanity and protect our economic base, because these costs that are coming across right now we're already bankrupt, but they will it will make us worse than bankrupt.
Oh, you're right, Richard. And it's a policy failure on epic proportions. And the core of the Democratic Party, I'm not talking about African American women, but I am talking about African American men and Hispanic men. They are turning away from Biden in droves over this issue. And hopefully this backfiring, it's not just any category. Americans aggregately, whether you're Republican, Democrat, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, they want to see a secure border. They realize, hey, a lot of this is cheap labor coming in, and it's going to, in theory, it's supposed to drive wages down. But I don't know, Richard. I think this problem is going to continue. State budgets, city budgets are swelling. They've got illegal immigrants in city parks, taking up recreational facilities, and they got them in schools to where the local community is being told, well, we don't have any money for your school. And yet, there they go, putting illegal immigrants into schools. It's mind-boggling.
Well, they've got them at airports. They fly on airplanes at government or NGO expense based on government grants without going through any security. They're given EBT cards per diem for meals, put up in 5-star hotels. They're getting primo treatment right now when the law says in most of the cases they should be deported. And again, this has all been proactively done. It's not an accident. So when I hear you use the word policy failure, I don't believe the Biden administration believes they've had a policy failure. The only thing they're worried about are optics. Yeah. And the only time they've done anything was when the optics at the border looked bad, they improved the process to get the illegals off the border as fast as possible. Now what they're doing is you can go on the Custom and Immigration System, us.gov website, and you can apply for asylum on the website anywhere in the world. And what they're going to be doing, and we'll find out about it later, is as opposed to these people coming to the border to present themselves for asylum, I believe the U.S. government will be flying them in over the border into U.S. cities so they never show up on the border.
You know, you're probably right. I mean, the Biden administration, to them, this is a policy success. Bear in mind, the people in that White House are radical liberals, the ones advising Biden. Here's a guy that promised to come in as a moderate and serve one term, and he's been anything but. I mean, it's really disgusting. Richard, what do you make of this whole Russia collusion thing being exposed as the fraud that it was? We got about 2.5 minutes left.
Well, the unfortunate thing is once it's exposed as a fraud, I don't think you're going to see much reporting about it. And so most people will not realize that's happened. And so it might as well have been what they accused it of being, because nobody will ever get the straight story.
You know, a lot of people suffered through that fake Russia story. And hopefully, you know, I think this may happen to the degree that Trump's leading in these polls. If it does look like Trump's going to be elected, maybe some of these bureaucrats that frame people, lied, testified under false pretenses, the whole premise, which was completely debunked, maybe you'll get some whistleblowers who will start screaming, because a lot of people got affected by that. And the American public was basically lied to. So I'm hoping this story does get exposed. Listen, Ukraine, Russia. Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Well, I was going to say the sad thing is if Adam Schiff wins the Senate seat in California, based on everything he did, that shows what a travesty we have in our electoral system.
Well, speaking of Schiff, you know, in California right now, they have a primary in 2 weeks. There's a jungle primary out here. And you got Adam Schiff, Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and then baseball great Steve Garvey, who's the only Republican running. The top 2 finishers advance to the general election. Schiff's winning, shockingly. And then second place right now appears to be between Steve Garvey and Katie Porter. Hopefully Garvey can get second so he at least makes it into the general election. But, you know, it's tough out here in California in a solid blue state. Let me tell you some of the crazy stuff. We got 30 seconds left. You know what? Fast food workers now, Richard, they're paid $16 an hour out here. There's a law that goes into effect starting in April. Fast food workers, $20 an hour. I got news for you. I don't know how many restaurants are going to close. I'll give you the last word. You got 20 seconds.
Well, we've had inflation that none of us like, but one of the things that's made the Big Mac meal go to $18 in some places has been the $15 minimum wage in fast food restaurants. So that was a double whammy in those markets. And I guarantee you those businesses will look for ways to eliminate labor and put in more automation.
Richard, thank you for joining us today. Always insightful. Folks, we'll be back on Thursday. We're covering all the hot topics for you. Stay with us. Patriot.tv. Get on there and subscribe. It's going to be great. Coming February 26th. Have a good evening. See you on Thursday.